I hope we're kind of technically connected at least, and let me welcome everyone who's made it to the call so far, to the first webinar that we're having on global governance and power shift. My name is Wolfgang Germann. I'm the Executive Director of the Center. I will be facilitating this call, and I'm very grateful and pleased to have Tim and Kate with us from Pact, both of them having been at where the story that we're going to talk about started last September in Berlin. Maybe for those who are not in Berlin, and I know that some of you have been, the center had a little laboratory in September in Berlin with representatives, I think, of 7 different civil society organizations on the issue of global governance and power shift. And this seminar or laboratory was facilitated by Ed Boswell from Connor Advisory, who's also on the call, and myself. And we spent 2.5 very fruitful days in very beautiful weather on trying to break the paradoxon that while many civil society organizations are doing regular governance reforms, very few of them are happy with the actual results of the status. This is something that came out of the preceding survey that we did. So we were looking at a triangle of how the power inside and around the organization flows through the governance, meaning structures and processes that we use, into the intent that we as humanitarian or development or social justice workers are aiming at. And after 3 days, I think there was a lot of learning, and the organizations that were part of this discussion committed to follow up action plans. And we also agreed that we would share with each other some successes or maybe failures of these action plans. We have now an opportunity to dive a little deeper into what Pact, the organization Pact, did with some of the findings and some of the thoughts that have developed in September. And again, very grateful and happy to have Tim and Kate with us, who will lead us through the little revolution that is happening in your organization. And having said that, I want to pass the word and the ownership of the webinar to the two of you. Maybe one thing I want to mention, that with everybody's consent, we are recording this session so that we can share it with those who are not on the call today. So having said that, can I ask Tim and Kate to take over, hoping that you're technically capable and intellectually you are anyway. So Tim and Kate, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Wolfgang, for that introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be in touch, and it was great to see so many familiar names in the list of attendees. I'll start with kind of a quick introduction for those of you who don't know me, and then invite Kate to do the same, and then we'll sort of jump into the slides. But my name is Timothy Staffa, and I'm a vice president at Pact. I work in a wide range of areas. One of them is support to our board of directors and all of the sort of governance work of the organization as part of the office of the CEO. And you know, as Wolfgang mentioned, we're on a journey to really kind of refashion and reimagine what the governance of an INGO could be and should be in the 21st century. And what we'll be sharing with you today is some of our thinking to date, some of the learning from the Global Governance Lab in Berlin, and how we applied that learning to inform where we are. So I'm thrilled to be here and eager to dive into a discussion. Kate?
Yes, hello everybody. Ooh.
Hi, Kate.
There's feedback. Hi, I'm the Senior Director, Regional Director for Africa, based in Washington, but currently calling from South Africa. It's good to be in warm weather. I am in the project management unit of Pact, and what that means is I provide support to country offices. I currently have 14 countries under me, and what I do with that is I support them in the way they work and with the communities that they serve, implementation, also budgeting, and also looking at strategy and opportunities within Pact in different countries. I'm happy to be here to be sharing the journey that we've been going through.
Great, thanks, Kate. So just jumping in, we've titled this presentation "Radical Ownership," in large part because that is, in fact, what we're trying to do is to radically address the ownership structure of Pact, and to do that to fulfill our promise, our vision of to those we serve. And so we thought we would start where we left off in September of last year, which was at the end of the Global Governance Lab in Berlin. And as you may, for those of you who were there, you may recall that we were using this sort of conceptual framework where we had, on one side of a flip chart, a cloud that represented our intent, right? And on the other, another cloud that represented our power. And so we have sort of appropriated this framework. Ed, thank you, and Wolfgang, thank you for sharing it with us, because it's really helped us sharpen and crystallize our thinking and really hone in and zoom in on the issues that we think we need to address this, these power issues that we've covered. But for Pact, our intent is really clear, and we serve communities challenged by poverty and marginalization around the world in over 40 countries, because we envision a world where everyone owns their future. That's our intent. It's about ownership of your future, and not in a sort of ethereal way, but in a very tangible way. And we think the best way to achieve this vision is when the communities we serve are, one, heard, they are genuinely heard, are capable, right, have the ability and the means to realize their potential, and are ultimately vibrant, right, are healthy and economically prosperous. And so that frames the right side of this equation for us. Is we have a clear understanding of what our intent is, and what direction that points this organization. So over to you, Kate.
So technically, I realize the slides are not moving. So if it's just me, that's fine. But we seem to be on the cover page.
There may be a little lag.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay.
That's fine. So just following up on what Tim said on our intent. Yes, this is our intent, where we want a world where everyone owns their future. And yet, when we evaluated the results, which we shared with yourselves when we came to the power, when we conducted our power dynamics interviews before the September lab, and when we went to our board, to the board meeting in November, we found that those with most power are actually not the ones our intent describes. Currently, the ones with the most power, it's very clear, still our funders, our donors, because they determine the kind of projects we are going to hold, when we are going to hold them, and how. And as the donors even get more and more stringent, you have contracts. They are no longer cooperative agreements, for those that know, because 85% or so of our funding comes from US government. Once you have a contract, it's just as good as a consultancy agreement. Everything is stipulated, and you do it, the project is delivered as stipulated. And then our board of directors does the same thing. That's where the power is. It was interesting talking to them. Most of them were saying, yes, we do provide, we are able to make decisions and provide guidance on how Pact operates. And then after that, it was our officers of the corporation. This is the CEO, the CFO, and the COO. So there's nothing that we do at this point that points at what the communities we serve require. So our vision statement says we want our communities to own their future, but we almost they don't have any formal power or say in what the organization is and how and what the organization is doing. So what we found was a massive disconnect between our intent and where the power lies in the organization.
That's right. And maybe just before moving on a little further to mention that, we found it incredibly useful to use the power dynamics interview questions that the ICSC created for the Global Governance Lab with our board. We were fortunate in that coming out of the Global Governance Lab in September, we were on the heels of our November board meeting. And so we had an opportunity to ask our board members those same questions about how power is manifested in this organization, who has the power to determine who has power at Pact, and so on. And I think what those interviews with our board surfaced were the very same challenges that we surfaced in obstacles, if you will, to aligning power with intent that we surfaced at the Global Governance Lab. So it was encouraging to see, a shared understanding between those of us in management of an organization, as well as those of our board members at Pact, around the obstacles we need to overcome as we seek to align power and intent. And so when we dug a little deeper, what we found was that there were sort of three primary interconnected drivers of this power imbalance in our organization. And this could differ from yours, but these are the three that we found were most salient in this organization. The first, and it directly links to the power source that our donors have, is our business model, which is sort of a traditional donor-driven, project-based business model, where those who allocate resources, in our case, USAID is a very large donor for Pact, tend to have a huge amount of power. And in many ways dictate, as Kate was just saying, where, when, how we work and who we serve in some instances. And so what we found is our business model it plays a critical role in limiting the communities we serve from really being able to be heard by not only this organization, but so that was the first major kind of obstacle that we felt we had to overcome. The second is our traditional INGO governance model, right? And we spent a lot of time talking about this in Berlin, which I sort of describe as a wholly northern model, right? Where we have a 17-member board, mostly made up of American and European nationals. It has the sort of ultimate source of authority for the organization. It can, the buck stops there, an American expression, in terms of where sort of power lies within the organization. And our governance model, our intent, and I would say our board is, fully aligned around the intent and seeks for it to become material in the world. However, the model we have from a governance standpoint, again, limits the ability of the communities we serve from being heard by this organization. It really does. And while we try to kind of address that through field visits, the November board meeting, for instance, was in Madagascar to get the board into the communities we serve. That only goes so far, right? In really trying to connect the governance of this organization with our intent. And then the third sort of major driver that we found is our operating model, the way we're structured as an organization and the way we operate as an organization. And what we have is a very sort of classic 20th century corporate model. There's a parent company with a set of subsidiaries who have branch offices in the 40 countries we work in around the world. And control of all of this sits in this office here in Washington, D.C., essentially, legally, if you will. And so, again, our operating model, the way we're structured as an organization, we found to be one of the major sort of drivers of this power dynamic and power imbalance within Pact. So, the three kind of sort of shorthands that I use is one driver is money, that's the business model piece. The other one is really around privilege in a way, and you can see elements of that manifested in the governance model, who has the privilege to serve on a board or in a governance role for an organization like Pact. And then the third is just kind of legacy and institutional inertia, ways in which we've operated for 50 years that may no longer be appropriate for realizing our intent. So those were the three primary drivers. And what you see is, yeah, over to you.
Okay. So in summary, what we found was that there was a massive imbalance between our intent and how power is distributed at Pact. So that imbalance between the donors, directors, which Tim alluded to, most of them, I think now maybe we have 2 from Africa, but most of them are Europeans and Americans. And then our chief executives on one side and the communities we serve on the other. For instance, and Tim has talked about this a little bit. When we're in Madagascar, for me, because the exercise we had, we wanted the board members to go into communities, and the question we asked is, go out and identify a shareholder, because we are also shifting to calling our communities shareholders. It was interesting how that took a while, because it takes mindset shift, and also there's lots of other barriers in Madagascar. It's a French-speaking country and all that, and all put together. I'm just looking at how mindset and how ready, just the readiness for us to go to start having that shift, and the legacy is going to take a while, but we are on that journey and we're going to take it. And so going forward then, this is why Pact has been busy transforming the way we are governed and structured, and the way we think and act about power, to right the fundamental imbalances in our sector, starting with ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So what we'll show you now are kind of a set of somewhat complicated slides. There's a lot here, and we'll have plenty of time, I think. We'll probably need another 10 minutes or so to wrap up this presentation, so there should be plenty of time for questions and to dive deeper. But what we're going to do is sort of walk you through some of the very concrete changes that we are making in this organization to address those primary drivers of power imbalance impact. And one of those changes is on the corporate structure side. Under a newly registered entity we're calling Pact Global, we are shifting from our current parent subsidiary structure, a classic kind of pyramid, if you will, to a system of partner or affiliate organizations that are joined together by our shared vision of a world where everyone owns their future. And these are sort of, in some ways, that single pyramid, if you were to imagine a pyramid in the middle of the screen, kind of breaks into 2, and you have sort of 2 interlocking pyramids, if you will, that start to represent a more balanced approach to the way we are structured and operate as an organization. The Pact affiliates will be either subs and who will have a primary accountability to the investors, the donors who invest in this organization, or hubs that will be community-centric and ultimately accountable to the communities we serve. Each affiliate will be sort of uniquely positioned, fit for purpose, to address the needs of either the community they serve or the investor they serve. And so, for instance, Pact Tanzania or Pact South Africa, where Kate is at the moment, will know everything there is to know about communities challenged by poverty and marginalization in Dar es Salaam or Songo or wherever it is that those communities exist. That will be their mandate. That will be their focus. That is who they are accountable to. The subs, such as Pact US or Pact UK, existing entities we have, will be experts in knowing everything they need to know about those who invest in this organization. Are bilateral donors, multilateral donors, corporate and foundation donors, and each will have sort of a unique specialty to do that, right? And a unique set of skill set, a unique set of alignment to be able to understand what those needs are. And so it's the combination of both of these perspectives that we believe of both kind of this global knowledge and these global relationships that are flowing into the organization with local knowledge and local relationships that are flowing into the organization through the hubs, that will give Pact the ability to balance the needs on both sides of this equation, so that at the end of the day, we can deliver lasting systemic solutions to the communities we serve on the one hand, the most important part of this whole thing, the whole reason we're here, but also deliver results for the investors we serve, recognizing that we need to create a balanced corporate organization, right? That can bridge both needs, right? And find the best of both, if you will. So that's a quick summary of the changes that are taking place at the corporate level.
So to complement our new structure, we'll also be changing our the way Pact Global will be governed. And this will be through a new shareholder council. As I said before, the people and the communities that we serve, we are going to be calling shareholders. And they will have the moral authority to set our vision, values, and goals. And the council will be geographically, demographically, and socioeconomically represented by shareholders. For example, almost 70% of our shareholders are women currently. So the council will have the same makeup. And I'm currently in South Africa, just an example, and I think I have made this presentation, I don't know how many times, talking to the team. And the question is, that comes up every time, is how can our communities that we are serving that are illiterate be on a council? How will they understand, how do they understand the concepts? And so it took me over 2 hours on Monday when we started just to get to a point where they accepted the concept, which then goes to show that even among ourselves, we still need to understand, because of the legacy and how we've worked before, we really need to change, which requires mindset shifts, because how we have been operating is really deeply ingrained in us, where we feel that we have beneficiaries and we are the ones that support the beneficiaries. So it's still work in progress, but it's something that we are excited about.
Mm-hmm. And so rounding out this picture, we have a board of directors that will balance the shareholder council and completes the governance of this organization. It will have 17 members, we believe, and be the source of fiduciary authority for the organization. Right? It will have the mandate to set the strategy, approve the strategy, I should say, budgets, oversee organizational performance in pursuit of the vision and goals set by the council. Right? So the board of directors' role in this governance construct is to put in place the mechanisms by which and provide the oversight such that the vision, values, and goals that the shareholder council has identified are best realized. Right? And so it's the board will have a very different composition than the board we have today. And in fact, a lot of the work that we've been doing since the fall, since September, has been on kind of redesigning this top left element of the model. But it will be a much truer reflection and representation of the global nature and diversity of the places where we work. And there will even be a mechanism by which the shareholder council can appoint members of the board of directors. So even we're going even a step further in balancing that skill to create that kind of interdependency, that interlocking nature between these two sides of our governance model. So that is as I said, there's a lot in this slide, and we'll have a chance to go back to it, but that sort of rounds out a summary of some of the work we're doing on the side to address the key drivers of the power imbalance. Yep, over to you, Kate.
Sure. So just to add, just finally, before we open up for questions, it's just looking at these changes, they really help us break the inherent power dynamics and, imbalances, and so that our own organizational structure, the ones that are perpetuated by our own organizational structure. And over time, we hope will serve as a model for others in the sector and beyond. And so this will also help us become an organization that's owned by the people we serve. That measures our worth and how we improve the state of the world. And when I talked about this, again, just coming to the experience I'm having here, because we are going through a systems practice process in order to do our strategy. I was talking to one of the field offices, KwaZulu-Natal, which is field officers outside South Africa. And I was surprised to hear that there are some communities in that region that are actually saying, we no longer want to receive handouts, we want to be heard, we want to define and have a say in the kind of services you provide us. And so this lady was really excited that this is timely, if Pact is doing it, let's lead and show the others. And hopefully for them, they're even looking broadly to say, probably this will also influence the way our government works. So this is, in a nutshell, the experience and the presentation that we have, and we'll open up for questions and comments going forward. Tim.
Well, thanks to both of you. Really appreciate you sharing this part of your very exciting journey with the community. I'm sure there's questions and comments out there, so let me try to manage this in the way that if you want to speak, just unmute your microphone. I can see this, and I have seen that Ed has unmuted his microphone, so I'll give him the word. And maybe we'll collect 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll let you answer. And thanks, Oliver, for dialing in. And we all see you have to run, but we'll wait for Plan giving the next webinar, right? Okay, so over to Ed.
Well, Tim and Kate, fantastic presentation. It's so exciting to see how you took the ideas that the group discussed in September and applied them. So very excited about this. One small question and then a larger question. The small question was one of the last slides that the 2 of you showed. It showed now this new shareholders council and then the board of directors. And I noticed that the color shading of the board of directors shared both what looks like purple and blue. Is that intentional? Are you talking about a different composition there that reflects the 2 sides of your new model?
Yes, the answer is yes. And so there are parameters that the board is still sort of weighing to determine what is that exact breakdown. This sort of shows up as 50-50. And that could, I think that's the desire to get there. We still have to put in place a pipeline to get to that 50 blue, if you will. But yes, that's very intentional, the color coding.
Great. Well, that's exciting, and that's a huge step. I know. So one question I had is, so this is a pretty big change, a pretty big shift. How are you recruiting sponsors for this change? And how are you all dealing with or leveraging the resistance that you're encountering? Those are my questions.
It's a great question. And in fact, I'm reflecting on the work plan that Kate and I put together, the sort of 90-day work plan deliverable that we put together at the end of the Global Governance Lab. And in it, what we had was we had identified sort of critical allies in the organization who we believe, because of their sort of philosophical predisposition or interest, are with us on this front. And in fact, Kate, you can speak more about this, but many of the countries that Kate is working in, including South Africa at the moment, are places where we think the moment is now to start to make these changes. So we've identified a set of sort of natural allies who we hope to sort of enroll in a more sort of formal sponsorship role in the time, in the weeks and months to come. And but a lot of the work that we've been doing at the moment has been to create alignment and ownership of these changes at our board. So if you were looking at this slide here, we've really been focused mostly on the kind of top third of this graphic, and less so on the bottom 2/3. But that's changing, and so we have every 2 years we convene a global forum where we bring 70 leaders of this organization together. They're essentially all the people who either sit on hubs or subs in this picture, and so that event is the first week in April, and it will be a critical moment for us to create a shared understanding among the leaders of this organization about the changes that are taking place at the corporate level in our operating model, and more importantly, alignment and to share what the expectations are of them in sponsoring this change within their organization or within their kind of respective parts of the organization. So the short answer, I guess, is we still have that work cut out for us, and it's really the first week in April where we think it's going to kick off in earnest. But yeah, but I'd invite Kate to kind of share more, given her recent experience in South Africa.
Okay, so what we also did, even before, I think we had shared this before. From the onset, the CEO had a leaders of leaders group. So what we've been doing most of the time with that group, which is mostly senior leaders within the DC office and also country directors, we keep giving, and this is what I'm realizing because I'm in South Africa, and I think this is maybe the third or fourth time I'm here making the same presentation, but I'm coming out of when I travel on Saturday, I'll be feeling better than I've ever felt because it has sunk in. It takes time. And then also with the low-hanging fruit, as we are saying, also looking at countries, because absorption rate, as you know, is different. Different countries are selected at different times. So South Africa is ready. And the process we are going through now, which we just did here, the system structures, has just grounded us. So when we share experiences in Paris in April at our Global Forum meeting, what we try to do is also entice or encourage others by them listening to what another country is doing, because it's so easy to talk about transformation and it becomes a DC based initiative, so let them run with it. But what we're doing now, we're being intentional about getting country offices at different levels, showing examples of the little bits that they are doing. And the other thing that I wanted to note is Tim and I have been involved with the shareholder council. The other thing that we've also done to move the needle is we have an interim advisory council, we're calling them, I think Tim IC, and these are from 4 countries, Zambia, Tanzania, we have 2 from Asia, to start also supporting us to advise us, because we are realizing that if we don't hear that voice from the onset, we might miss out on something. So there are different levels of initiatives that are ensuring that we really zero this in. And remember, it will be different parts absorption at different times.
Thanks both. We have Dominik Schubkochen from CBN who has the hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wolfgang, and a big thanks to the presenters for this very exciting presentation. I have basically 3 questions to both of you. Number one is if you could elaborate a little bit on the shareholder council. So how big do you envisage that, and how do you envisage that to operate, because it's clearly more than an advisory body, if I understand that correctly. So they work on vision and mission. So that's my first question. The second question would be if you could elaborate on the relationship between the board of directors and the shareholder council, how you envisage that in the future. And the third one is actually much more practical. So who is in fact giving up most power through this change? And how do you accompany your change champions through that process, especially those who are actually willing to give up power, and I'm sure we'll face a lot of resistance and critical questions in the organization.
Great questions. Kate, do you want to start somewhere, or should I tackle the first two and you take the third?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, so on the shareholder council, what we're envisioning is the sort of first incarnation of this. We are aiming for 100 members, so not a huge number. Especially in light of the fact that Pact works with about 2.5 million people a year. That's sort of our reach, if you will. So, but we wanted to start with kind of a manageable number. So 100 is the one that we've landed on. And the way we see the shareholder council operating is it would meet every 2 years. We still are looking at whether it would require an in-person meeting or whether we could do it virtually using technology to help bridge language barriers and so on. But the idea is that they would meet every 2 years, and they would use those meetings to essentially either reaffirm their commitment to the vision and goals of this organization, the heard, capable, and vibrant language that I shared at the beginning of the presentation, or if the reality has changed and the shareholder council determines that it is best for this organization to address some other critical issue, then there would be some sort of formal way to bring that to a vote and to make a decision about new goals or perhaps even revisions to our vision and values. So that's the idea. It would meet every 2 years. Initially, you would have 100 members who are representative of the geographies and demographies that we serve, and that's kind of the basics. But that's sort of version one. Over time, we really hope for this to be, and maybe there's ways of using technology platforms to do this much more extensively, and in a way that we could almost even perhaps engage with all of our shareholders in some way, or at least have them weigh in some way. So that's the kind of longer term vision there. The relationship between the board and the council is as I mentioned, the council will have the right to appoint a certain number of board of directors. So there will be, and those appointees will have to sit on the council. So there will be some, overlap there. The board of directors will also have the ability to sit in and observe, I guess, the shareholder council meeting. So there's going to be, I sort of, and this is probably imperfect, but I envision this kind of as a bicameral governance structure. There are sort of co-equal branches of government, if you will, although each has a separate set of purpose and a set of authority. But the exact kind of relationship and the dots, the connective tissue that connect that will bridge these two sides of our governance model, we still really need to work through. But at the beginning, it'll just be some interconnected overlap, and then the right for each to sit in and observe the proceedings of the other. So that's what we have so far. And then the third one, which is who's giving up the most power. That's a really interesting question. And how I'm preparing for that, Kate, I'd love your thoughts on that.
Sure. So when we came from our meeting, excited that, okay, what we're going to do, and when I'm talking about the meeting, I'm talking about the governance lab. Tim and I said, okay, we looked at a triangle, right? And just picture a triangle. Unfortunately, I have no way to scribble for you to see the tip. And then we say, okay, this is where donors are, this is where we are, and this is where shareholders are. And giving up power means tilt the triangle. This is where shareholders are at the top and the other way. And with time, and you'll see on our last slide, it's actually, there will be giving up of power from obviously the directors and everyone, but it's not totally giving. It's now saying we are sharing power is how they see, talking to Mark, it's like, okay, he drew a box and put 3, it was 4, like across and said, okay, we are not saying somebody is more powerful than the other. we will listen to each other more and share power so that the shareholders, they own their future. They are letting us know what we do. We find resources. There's government, there's another sector. And that's the last actually, for me, I still think that's the way I would look at this, as opposed to a just, with 360 tilt. And Tim, I don't know, maybe the thinking has changed since then, but that's where I'm looking at it, and I sort of believe in that, because we are not talking about the tilt, but we are saying shareholders also should be at the table to state, and this is why we even have them in the council and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, maybe you.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, just to add, I see our board of directors giving up formal power, right? In that they have agreed, and I've already actually decided this, that the power to determine the direction this organization moves in will sit with the shareholder council, and that's a big shift for Pact, and so at that level, I would say that's where the biggest power shift is happening. Within the organization, there's an interesting shift in that I believe once we complete the build out of the corporate structure and the operating model, and we're still very much at the beginning of it, what you're going to find is that this office in Washington, D.C. Will have a lot less power, and that a lot of that power will shift to the hubs, our country offices. The other big shift that I expect is if we are successful in shifting that center of gravity from our donors, right, that investor side of this equation, to the community, we might also be able to influence our donors. There will be sort of almost like a market dynamic within Pact, whereby hubs may decide that it doesn't make sense for them to take USAID money, for instance, in wherever, because it isn't best addressing the needs of the communities that serve, right? And the sub on the other side of the system will have to just accept that, right? And either work with its investor to understand how it can better address the needs of the communities, right? Because we will have very close proximity to those and a good understanding of them. Or help the investor understand that the way they are doing programming isn't in fact in the best interest of a group of people that we both seek to serve. So that's kind of theoretically how we see that shift happening. But the idea isn't so much, I think it's to balance out the scale, right, which is that visual we've been using in this presentation, and to lend as much weight to the desires, the interests, the goals, the dreams of the communities we serve as we do today to our investors and others, right, in this organization. So we'll have to see, and we'll be vigilant about that, but I see that as a big shift as well.
Thanks both again, and to my mind, an immediate question follows. I mean, first of all, I think it's great that you're not just tackling the actual structures and the way these governance bodies work with each other, but that you are very explicit about accountability to various stakeholders, of course. And, of course, there will be conflicts, and, you'll find mechanisms to resolve those. But I think that was one of the learnings of the lab, that we have to be very intentional about accountability, to whoever matters, but then also not ignoring those transparency and accountability dimensions.
Yeah.
Now, one question that I had, when I listened to your fascinating journeys, and it's it sounds a bit fluffy, but the organizational culture, the mindsets, the shifts of attitudes, if you wish. Obviously, there's some of that already, otherwise you wouldn't have been successful in transforming your governance structure. But what else are you going to do about this, particularly when push comes to shoves and people, they might fall back into old power or other dimensions? Have you thought about this?
Yeah, we have, and there's an interesting, and in fact, the work that Kate's doing in South Africa at the moment, I think, is a good example of this. And I'll tee it up and invite Kate to weigh in. But I'll give you a very specific example of how that mindset shift is taking place, and why we believe we're on the right track, and why we believe that we have a winning argument every time this resistance, this mindset culture resistance comes up. So many of our country offices are in the midst of updating their strategies, and this work started towards the end of last year and will be wrapped up in some places, on a rolling basis over the next 12 months or so. And what we found was when the work was kicking off, the guidance that was being issued made no reference anywhere to our shareholders, to the communities we serve. Apologies. And essentially what these were business development strategies. How do we, as an organization in country X, Y, and Z, position ourselves to, get market share or secure this project or whatever, right? And so when we saw that, in light of all of these other changes that are taking place, and the fact that our country offices will soon become hubs and ultimately accountable to the communities we serve, we said, wait a second, let's pull this guidance back and have this whole process start with engagement with the communities we serve, and kind of a dedicated approach to documenting what do they want this organization that's working in their community to do for them. And so Kate is in South Africa right now, participating in these events with our shareholders and stakeholders, right? Partner organizations, government, and so on, to start to capture those insights, to that local knowledge and relationship arrow coming in, right? And to document that in a way that we can then act on and use to inform decisions about where we seek funding to meet those those needs. And so it was interesting to see how the moment we raised this big gap, right, in our approach to strategy, we were expecting people to say, well, yeah, but at the end of the day, we have to keep the lights on and stuff like that. And what we found was that none of that resistance surfaced, and if it did, it didn't last very long. And that many of our leaders in our country offices said, oh yeah, this is absolutely where we need to begin, and how can you support us to capture that information and to act on it? And that's what Kate is doing in South Africa at the moment. So Kate, I don't know if you want to share a little more on the work in country.
Sure. So what we are doing at the moment, and when I started, I said that it took 2 hours on the Monday, because this has been it's lasting a week. 2 hours on the Monday to just get us to a point where we are talking about shareholders and interrogating. The most important thing is we gave people space to ask. Then the following day we had an extended team. And when we had the extended team, the same people that made me sweat, for lack of a better word, were the ones that were talking about explaining to the others. So there is so much, there's so much appetite for the change and how we need to work towards the shareholder piece. And all people need at the moment is for us to give them space to interrogate the processes, and then when they are convinced, they are ready to go. So yesterday we had shareholders, which were mostly youth, and stakeholders, which were local organizations, and then we had somebody from a government. And we practiced this using the systems practice, where we were looking at, we should listen to understand, you should be intentional, you should be sensing. And we came out of that feeling, oh my gosh, you actually can listen to shareholders. And the shareholders we had immediately, when we did an evaluation, said, why don't we do this every time? Why can't we replicate this in our communities? So in short, what we're saying is, in terms of mindsets, there are a couple of things. There are some people that we never change, and obviously decisions are made around those at some point on whether you separate or not. But before we do that, we are really intentional about, because this is a new concept and there's a legacy, to get people where we want them to be. And where South Africa and the team is at the moment, I think we are now we are at a point where all we have to start doing is reinforcing the mindsets that they have and supporting them. So this whole, and I'm grateful to Tim and his team in getting us using the process of systems thinking, because it's really made people change.
Yeah, and just to add one point to Kate, another tool that we have found really effective in helping shift mindsets is, and other organizations do this in our space, but is encouraging our country offices, these hubs, to create archetypes of their shareholders, of the communities they serve. And so some of the work that's happening in South Africa today is focused on one of our shareholder archetypes, which is adolescent girls and young women. And how and the sort of systemic forces that perpetuate cycles of poverty and marginalization in that particular group. And so by turning this kind of amorphous shareholder thing into a very concrete archetype, and there will be many, right? Each country will have several. There's work happening in Myanmar right now, and elsewhere in Nigeria, to get a really intimate and in-depth understanding of the drivers of poverty and marginalization affecting this archetype group. And what we've found is that by making it concrete and specific about somebody and you've met last week in the community, the power shift it's effortless, right? In that, of course, we're serving this adolescent girl and young woman. We're not in this work for some bureaucrat back in DC, or for me, or for even our partner organization who we love and we're working with, shoulder to shoulder. It's about who this is about to begin with, right? And that's, that little instrument, that little artifact, I think has helped us a lot in being able to get people to sort of internalize what that shift means, right? That the power is in her hands, right? Not ours, not our donors. It's in her hands, and that's what we need to, that's what we'll be kind of perfecting as we keep rolling this out.
That's really fascinating, and I have a feel that the approach of archetyping or archetypes actually might require another hour or something to dive into, because that really, that could help us. We cannot assume that the group of beneficiaries or people we work with is a homogeneous one, right? Particularly if we have large outreach, and how do we represent those share and stakeholders in the right way?
Yeah.
Great, and also to you, Kate. I mean, yes, you say that made you sweat, but you also exercise obviously something that we thought important last September, which is leadership. Which brings people to the space where they want to be at the end of the day, and I think that's really encouraging to see that it bears fruits. We might have time for one more question. Anyone out there? Going once, going twice, SOS maybe, or? Okay. If that's not the case, so let me just mention two things. We have this little community here which has regular update calls on where they're at, and we decided to make this a bit more intense through the webinar that we have just had, and really appreciate the exciting deep dive that you were offering, both Tim and Kate. We were planning, and I was not joking, to address Plan as another organization that had offered to hold a webinar. They have been delayed for some reasons, but their experience of doing a unconscious bias exercise with their own board about power and exercising this power is still ahead of us. So we'll just stand by for another invitation to a webinar in a month's time or so. And then, of course, lastly, we are going to plan for another event in September. It will probably not be a lab, because I think we're going slightly out of experimenting mode, more into making things happen. But we also want to learn from what's happening in the various organizations. So the September event that we'll communicate early enough for those who are interested will probably be a in our global governance power shift intent 2.0. We're definitely going to use the triangle that mostly came out of Ed and Daryl's shop in the corner advisory. But make this as relevant as possible for the next steps of implementation. So we hope that all of you who are in this community will stay tuned and help us make this next iteration, this next step. And really want to thank everyone who's both participated in the journey so far, and again to Kate and Tim in particular, to help us make this next exciting and very successful webinar.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Good luck, and speak soon then.
Yes.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.